Yeah. All right, cool.
All right, let's get into it.
Bet. Okay. Episode 2. Only thing crazier than episode 1 is episode 2. So we brought the Louis Vuitton Don Nonso Anyanti here to to talk about who knows what we're going to talk about. Actually, I've got some ideas that are like completely different. They're and not in any way related, and like, we've known each other for years. We've been talking for years. So like, sometimes I just think of things and I'm like, yo, I wonder what Nonso's thinking about this. It just happens. So I just write those things down. So this is gonna be as unstructured as it gets. Literally, like,
All
this
right.
is pure free flow. So we were literally just talking like right before we started this about like you moving and sort of. So this is actually kind of crazy because my like first question or my first like thought was like, you know, like we've known each other since like early high school, and like this is like all part of the you're now like entering the stage of life where you're like a true adult, a working adult. For the record, you graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with a degree in, let me not mess it up, say exactly what your degree is.
Electrical and computer engineering.
Electrical and computer engineering. And at your time there, you where were the internships you had?
Chevron, Microsoft, Apple, and Jump Trading, where I'm working now.
Okay, so you went from, and the whole time you were doing like sort of like computer engineering stuff.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, the first one was kind of like IT.
Hmm.
Second one was like what I would consider like core software engineering. The third one was kind of like hardware slash like GPU engineering, I guess. And then or I guess sorry, the Apple one was that, and then the last one I did was like kernel development.
That's
So
dope.
kind of all over the
Yeah,
place.
so all over the place in the world of like tech. But the real statement here is that I have to ask is you've been moving a lot, and like I have two questions that are very centered. Number one, when you moved, did you buy the bed? And number two, did you build it yourself? And wait, number two, was it from IKEA? And number three, did you build it yourself?
So the whole engineering, and building their own furniture thing. So the thing is, I didn't buy the bed because in both cases, the person that I was taking over for left the bed frame. However, I did pull up to IKEA and I got this nice standing desk, so you can like wind it up and wind it down so you can stand and sit. Definitely
Yeah, no,
recommend it.
you're on
Um,
another level. No.
Basically, I mean, I can crank up the level any way I feel, but yeah, but it's definitely fun to build furniture. So I got that table, and I also got like this small little dining table that like you can fold out the sides to increase how many people can sit. So yeah, but those things are pretty fun to build. Um, but unfortunately, since I moved, I had to unbuild it and to like transport it in my car because it's not going to fit in my car if it's like built. So I undid it, and then like later this week I'll probably have to build it again. So
The man's building. The funny thing is, I asked that you took that question in a direction I did not even intend. I really asked that question as a joke because I was referencing the infamous part of Last Call where Kanye says, I moved. We went to me and my mom. We went to IKEA. We bought the bed. I built the bed myself.
oh yeah, yeah, no, no,
Where he
that's
wants to throw in the fact that he built
true.
his own bed. So like
Your mama hopped out the U-Haul van. Any customers, I ain't talked to them. Plus, I ain't got no room in my apartment.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I mean. So like, it's funny to me because like it's weird. Like, so I kind of wanted to talk about the College Dropout, and because it's
yeah,
funny because like Kanye wrote that album like, or at least parts of that album like around the same age that we are now, and obviously it was like 20 years ago at this point, but it's really interesting to me, like having listened to that album for years and years, like and sort of like capture how it captures that snapshot of like early Kanye struggling. Like, is there any part of that album like that has resonated with you like recently? Because I know it has like for forever, but like recently.
I have to say, like, I think I kind of identified a pattern with myself that I kind of also I related to the album, which is this like grind to get to the next level type of mindset. I know you talked about spaceship on one of your YouTube videos, and he has this one bar where he's talking about how he does 5 beats a day for 3 summers, and I'm like I relate with that so much because like that's something I found myself doing where like I told myself every summer I need to like level up essentially. Like how do I increase my skill in like whatever area? Most of the time it's like programming. I like try to like say like I need to like learn this particular thing. Um, but yeah, like that whole like keep grinding until you reach where you want to be. Like that's like the biggest thing like that I always connect with this album.
Yeah,
Um,
no, you're right. And for the listeners, the line goes, something like, one summer I did 5 beats a day for 3 summers. That's a different world, like pre-summers. I deserve to do these numbers, which is it's a
yeah,
fire line.
yeah.
Kanye has like a bajillion fire lines in that album. But yeah, no, like something that's interesting. This is like I don't know how this is working, but this is exactly what I sort of wanted to like get into. Is like you started off like at Carnegie Mellon, and like to me, like from an outsider perspective, like it just seems like you are like always evolving in like the skill set that you have, like as like doing like being a computer engineer and like a software developer. You're like always trying to like push for more and more. And like I guess that leads me to sort of like, do you is that in you, is that like something that sort of just develops like naturally? Do you like plan ahead like this is the kind of thing that I want to get, I want to learn? Or is it just like whatever challenge approaches me, I'll take it?
I think it's a combination of both. I think even like just at a young age, I always had an interest in computers. Like I'm always like thinking like, yo, we turn this thing on and like we type stuff into it and it just does whatever we want. Like that's literally just crazy, like just mind blowing to me. So to me, I've always wanted to have a deeper understanding of like what makes a computer work. And there's so many different areas like of computer science, like that are necessary to provide the experience that like so many people are used to. That like trying to cover them all is just a huge like thing in itself. So for me, it's like I always try to gain a deeper understanding of that and like dive into the next challenge. And I think one thing that I've always tried to do is like put myself in the most challenging like situation I can because like that just enables me to really dig deep and try to get the most out of whatever I'm doing with that experience. But yeah, it's something I've always kind of done.
No, that's dope. I definitely recognize in you. So like, yeah, and this is interesting to me because right, like as you mentioned, like you had these internships where you were at Microsoft and Apple, like two of the like biggest companies in tech, and like if you just ask any random person, they would be like, "Oh, you made it! Like that's the perfect thing. That's the perfect job." Like, and now you work at like a trading firm, like, and it's not as big, and you're always talking about like trying to do a startup or something, which we'll get into later. But like, so
Yeah.
here, this is like one of my favorite like sports news anchor like segment type questions. Like, what's the problem with the big tech companies? What's the problem with them?
All right. Thank you, Stephen A. Uh, so here's the thing with me. I don't think it's a problem, more as it's a preference.
Hmm.
So for me, like it's a preference of I would say the way I work, the control I have over my work, the granularity of that, and then the challenge. So I'll break down each one. You might have to remind me of like the four things because I might not remember. But so like the way that start off with the way that I work. Typically, I work pretty independently. Um, it's not to say like I can't work with others, but like I don't really work well when someone is like looking over my back and like saying like, "Oh, you need to do this." Most of the time, it's like I'm independent enough to where like you can kind of give me a task and leave me alone, and like I won't bother you unless it's like there is something really crucial that you need to tell me or whatever. So like I think I found with big tech like there's a lot of like oversight, I would say, just because it is so big, you want to like be able to like manage the kind of thing. And then on top of that, that also plays into the granularity of the work, which is like how much work you actually have. When you get to really big companies, what happens is you have what I would call legacy code bases, or like core services. Like for Microsoft, a legacy thing would be like Office, for example. Like Office has been around for years, and Apple, a legacy thing might be maybe some of the iOS firmware, or maybe some of the Mac stuff. Yeah, so there's a lot of like, and then maybe like Google, like the legacy would be Gmail, for example. So if you're working on a team like that, there's really not much you could do. Like, what could you really add to Gmail to enhance the experience? It's already a very polished experience. So with those kind of things, you kind of have a very small churn, like day to day. There's not too much going on, and yeah, with the culture things, I think that's one of the third ones I had. There's a lot of weird cultural things, I would say, with some of the big tech things. They kind of have this buy-in mentality type of thing, where, or at least some of them do. It's like you need to buy into this um, characteristic of like an employee. So Google has this thing about being googly. I think I might have told you about this whole googly thing before.
No, repeat though. You can elaborate. I'm interested.
So yeah, if you can look, you can literally look this up, but Google will describe employees as googly, or refer to their googliness, which is kind of like, it just, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's like ridiculous. It's kind of like a measure of how much like you fit with the company profile, or like the company, like not, maybe not mantra, but almost like enthusiasm or spunk. I
Ethos.
don't really know how to explain it. I think they have a description of it somewhere, but there's a measure of googliness, and you might be told like, or an interviewer might reject an interviewee for not being googly enough. Like that's actually a thing. At Apple, it's super privacy concerned, very siloed. So, for example, I couldn't talk about anything other than my own projects with people who were cleared to talk about that same project. So, for example, if I'm on Project Alpha and someone else is on Project Beta, and they don't have, and we were both only in those separate things, and not in each other's, I guess, project groups. We literally couldn't talk about those things at all. So you're kind of, and there's also levels of this, so it's pretty granular too. So there might be sub parts of the project that I'm allowed to talk about, but other stuff that I'm not. So they have a way of like managing this, but you really can't discuss things, and the idea is to like maintain this whole allure of, the Apple release. It's kind of like, when you walk out of a movie, and this is how they describe it, if I remember correctly. You walk out of a movie and you hear people talking about the movie before you go in, then you're gonna, like, it's like people walking out of the movie that just saw it, right? And then you're walking in and you're hearing people talk about it. It's like ruins the experience. So that's what they're saying, right? Like that's the whole idea behind keeping it secret. But to me, it doesn't hinder my work, but I lose sight of the bigger picture because I'm removed from the whole, what's the objective of this whole thing. Uh, yeah. So some of the cultural things, and then I think the last one was like the challenge. So it's not to say like working here isn't challenging, but I think each one of these presents a different challenge. So for Apple, the challenge, or big tech, and big tech is also very consumer facing. So a lot of the challenges are catered towards providing some kind of valuable consumer experience, and that differs from company to company. Like for example, Apple's value of compute, like a value they have for consumer experiences, are like privacy, for example. Like you always hear Apple talk about, iPhones are private. um yeah, so then these companies all have their own ideas that they kind of push as like what they think is best for consumers. um but that kind of leads to engineering solutions where you end up catering towards the consumer, which isn't to say that consumers are bad or anything. Like that's not my opinion. It's just that the solutions that you get from that aren't purely engineering driven sometimes. Like you may pull some things back. Like it's not on the cutting edge sometimes because you have to consider how the consumer is going to be impacted by this. So that brings like segues me to like the trading atmosphere, which I ended up being in, which I actually had no idea. Like I didn't even consider this like as a career choice until I had these other experiences and I kind of calibrated what I wanted in my career. And what I found from my internship, which was like I just decided to do it because after talking to recruiters, it seemed like a really interesting experience, something that was different from what I did, which I thought would be valuable because then I could evaluate, how I liked it and all that. So with that experience, I found that the environment was pretty fast paced and the technology was like on the extreme cutting edge. And then during my internship, I was working like, well, one, I was remote. So, and my mentor was also remote. So we were both like remote in different locations. So we had to like talk over Zoom and all that. But I got to be super independent. I got the project spec and they're like, go. And I was like, all right, let's go. And I could just do whatever I needed. If I needed something, I would tell my mentor. But for the most part, I'm just like doing what I need to do, getting feedback. And that was pretty nice. And yeah, like it just ended up being something I liked. Um, and I think the biggest thing that drew me here is I would say the the like I want to say quality of engineers is ridiculously high because the bar to entry for these places is super high. So everyone around you is like these are some of the best like engineers I've ever like encountered. Like there's levels. Like we've been talking about levels. There is levels. Like you can't see this if you're on audio, but it's like I'm here, bro. There's people like above the camera screen. Like it's
This
just
man is
like
saying there's levels.
it's just a different environment, like completely.
He's talking about like your favorite Lil versus the career of Jay-Z. There's levels to this, man.
No, there really are. Like they're not playing around when they say that. So to me, I saw that I'm like, if I want to level up, I gotta like learn from these people. So
Mm.
yeah, that was one of the big draws. But yeah, it's been pretty fun so far. So
No, it's dope. Okay, so I'm gonna hold a pin and like talking more and asking you a question, which I'll give you like some time to think about it, kind of in the background of like explaining some portion or some aspect of like the job you have now and like what it is that you do, and particularly like the interesting things with regards to computer architecture that you guys do, like something along those lines. But my more you got to you got to leave the segment off with the splashy set, the splashy headline. And the splashy headline is like, okay, you described these weird properties of like when you were working in a big tech company that like, you know, obviously they put a lot of thought into them and they're working for them. But it's weird to me because when I think about Google, when I think about Apple, when I think about Microsoft, any of these companies, the sort of things you're describing sound like the exact opposite of the environment that was necessary to start them. Like googliness, which is I'm never gonna get over how funny that shit is. But but googliness is like, to me, comes across like you're defining the type of person that's gonna be good at this. Whereas you would think that like the impetus and the entryway for like these companies was all about like letting in the weirdos, the people with the strangest ideas. And then similarly with like the siloing aspect of work, like the whole point is to see the big picture, is to get everyone to buy in. Like it's weird to me that like that this is the like, you fast forward a few decades and like this is the solution they come to, when to me that seems like the solution is sort of pushing out the type of people that would be great at it. And this is sort of a reoccurring theme that I've heard about in institutions. Like, so, a lot of people these days are talking about like academia the same way that like it was the people who wanted to just pursue pure knowledge in the beginning. Like it was built for the people who wanted to just learn and innovate and find more about the natural world, or the ability to create and build, whether that be engineering or science, natural science or mathematics. But like, you build on decades and decades, and it gets to this point where like you have to you have to create things like peer review, which is useful, but also like has this baggage to it, and like, you know, the process of getting tenure, or just like the citations and paying for journals and like all of that nonsense. So I
Hmm.
guess my bigger point, or my bigger like question is like, do you think that like institutions like inherently have to evolve in this way? Are they capable of avoiding this? And like if they are, like how?
I think that kind of boils down to like, or it kind of simplifies down, or not simplifies, but kind of translates nicely to the whole bureaucracy type of thing, where
Yeah.
you have things that you need to scale out in terms of the number of people and the size of the operation. So that requires layers of usually management or some structure to manage different levels, if you will. Seems like the theme.
The
but
theme is levels.
yeah, like I think in some sense it is kind of necessary to have these partitions where there's some kind of control over partitions. um so I don't know if I could comment on it in terms of it being inevitable. I think it's just kind of the de facto way of doing things. Like, I'm trying to think of other ways that you could do something at that scale without having, some of these things that come across with the institutions. I guess one of those things, like alternative things, is like the whole crypto space with like these decentralized organizations, which is something we talk about a lot, right? So
Yeah.
that's like the alternative, right? So it's completely decentralized. There's not really a central, authority, or like there's no notion of hierarchy, I guess.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's like an interesting take on how to manage people and have it scale, and then also have some sense of direction, because I mean that's really what an institution is. You have a sense of direction, you have people, and it scales, right? So that's kind of and typically you're providing some kind of service, but yeah, like
You make a
uh,
good point though. You make a good point because like I mean, we could get into crypto, but like something that's interesting, and just decentralized things in general, but something that's interesting about them is that they somehow have some sort of emergent directionality to them. Like, and I mean, they're probably, it's tougher, right? But somehow, I mean, you probably know it to a better degree than I do, but somehow these like cryptocurrencies and like crypto spaces and these decentralized um projects are somehow pushing themselves in a direction. I mean, with having either no or minimal amounts of bureaucracy. Because I mean, I don't. My natural instinct is to hate on managers, and I don't want to be the managerial hater. That's like such a like scientist, free thinker, like I don't know, quote unquote style, like of just
yeah,
like
done with
the
things.
kind of, you
Yeah,
know, I don't know. It just feels like sometimes the kind of person who succeeds as a manager is not the same kind of person who succeeds as like the person who innovates. Um, but managers are useful, and I don't mean to hate on them, but in moderation, I'll say. But yeah, like I mean, we can get into crypto. Like, how do you think crypto companies are like, and like spaces in crypto that you maybe understand or follow? How do they like have some sort of general focus? Like, what are ways that they're capable of doing that without the
yeah.
same kind of bureaucracy?
Crypto is strange in the sense that one of the biggest themes of crypto is decentralization. However, typically to actually forward some kind of agenda with a large group of people, you need to some you need to in some sense, like, there's going to be some centralization.
Hmm.
So that's the difficulty. Like, there's that dynamic between control of the direction and how people interact with whatever the crypto service or whatever it is. you need some kind of thing that's like, this is the one source of truth for what we're doing, which is inherently centralized. And then there's also like this whole, we're building decentralized services. There's these ideas of voting, like decentralized power and that and like that kind of thing, which kind of conflict. It's like you need, in order to provide this decentralized future, you need a period of centralization to allow it to happen. But
Yeah,
doesn't that
no.
sound like something we've seen before in
In
history?
history. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be in charge for a little bit. And then when I built it all great, then I'm gonna give up control and then I'm gonna let the people take over. Okay? And then 30 years later, I'm gonna invade Ukraine. Um but okay. So like this does sound like the classic like Ethereum, Bitcoin, like sort of like approach to like leadership. Because at least from what I understand, like Bitcoin, Satoshi like notoriously does not lead, and in the Bitcoin space, it's sort of like leadership by committee. I don't even know if that's the right word. It's not even committee. It's just like people talking, and it's just sort of on this train, and the train moves, and when people argue, it sort of just like it forces like things like forks and just like splintering of communities. Whereas Ethereum has Vitalik, and it's like he can lead the train in a direction. I don't
Yeah.
even have a question about that. That's just sort of like a thought that came to my
No, no,
mind.
no. I definitely agree because that's like my biggest. I mean, it's like it's like it's like one of those things where I don't even know the answer because I'm seeing it and I'm like, that doesn't seem quite like, it doesn't seem quite consistent with the underlying, decentralization thing. However, I don't really see a way that you can push forth this agenda without having some control and being able to say, no, we're gonna push forward this way because that seems to be the right direction to go in. So yeah, like that whole balance is very interesting. So yeah.
Okay, for all the crypto haters that I might have, what is the corniest thing in crypto that you've seen?
The
Throw some
corniest
hate.
thing.
Yeah, throw some hate at crypto. Like what? Give me your biggest hate take.
One thing I always found funny was, this isn't this. I think I'll probably think of something else, but one of the honorable mentions, I guess, was space coin. It
What
was
the heck?
the currency of space that somebody came up with. You
That's
can
what
mint,
we need.
you can mint space coins. So when Elon Musk takes you on a trip in his rocket, then
And I need to buy, things like a drink.
you
I need
purchase a tank of oxygen. Then you can you can
yo, if
use space
un,
coin.
unless, those the billionaires are gonna love that one, man. When they're up doing their little
But let me
tours.
think of a real. So there's a game. I forgot the name of the game, but it's a crypto based game where you need to essentially play against other people online, and you have these characters. It's almost like Pokemon. You have these characters with stats, and the better the stats, the more likely you are to win. But the stats are random, and you have to buy the characters essentially. Like you purchase a character, and then it has a random stats to it. So you need to keep purchasing these characters to get one with good stats to play well. But the idea is people can make a living off this if they become good enough. So I
Oh
think
my
like,
god.
yeah, so I think people actually use this as a means of income.
Jesus.
However, there's a system in the game where there's this idea of a whale where it's hard to actually get into the game because there's a barrier to entry of how much you know how much the coins cost to get into it. So a whale will sponsor you with that amount of cryptocurrency, but you have to give the earnings, like some of the earnings, to like these whales. So it's funny how institutions are like, these kind of things tend to repeat themselves
Bro,
even
that
in.
shit alone.
Like,
Yo, this
that sounds
is
like a surf. It's like a surf and like a
yeah,
boat.
I was literally thinking of a feudal system while you were talking
Yeah,
about this. I'm like,
feudalism.
there's decentralized feudalism.
Yeah, I mean, There's the internet is a funny place. I mean, that's just
the
one of the gems, you know.
the way humans will just like circle back to the same four ideas like over and over again.
Why don't we do that again? You know that goofy gif where it's like, I
Yeah,
do it again.
they're
Yeah.
basically just like, it's been once it's been long enough. I love this about humans. Once it's been long enough since we haven't seen how bad an idea is, like people forget, and like it's I think it takes like one generation of people being removed from like an idea being bad for like the next generation to be like, I don't know, let's try it again. Like, how bad was that again? I truly love that.
Except now we have more advanced technology and tools to make it even better, you know.
Yeah, far worse for civilization. Which brings me to Meta and Decentraland and like all of these things. I honestly don't know what the hell is going on. I just keep seeing like I keep getting recommendations. I don't watch anything crypto related, and I'm getting these or decentralized space related, and I'm like, oh, you know what I thought we needed? Like what I thought we needed was that people weren't on social media enough. So what we need to do now is like provide them a whole new life online where they can battle it out and create their own life online based on I don't even know, like somehow scarce currency, and they're gonna like provide no service to society. I thought we were trying to be better.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean the whole metaverse, and it's interesting because it seems to me like you're creating a problem and selling it as a solution. Like I don't
Oh,
understand the need. Wait, what?
oh, wait. Are you saying like the problem is like social media makes everyone hate their lives and like it's making the world a worse place, and they're like the solution is to get off of it and join
No,
the
no, no.
metaverse?
What I'm saying by that is I can't. Maybe I'm just I'm maybe I'm not farsighted enough, or I'm closed minded, but I can't really see the value proposition of living an entire digital life. Like I don't understand the what is the benefit of being completely in a digital life? Because what they're gonna say is there's just way more connections to make. Like Facebook loves to tout this whole connecting people thing.
In a shitty way, if you ask me. Like I think
Yeah.
people are far less. I don't even think it's my thought. Like I think that research, like sociological research, suggests that like young people are far less connected because despite the fact that we have way more quote unquote friends, like those are not the same as real friends.
It's like you could this is like computer science, but
A hypergraph?
no. And this is how I'll compare it. So imagine a graph
Yeah.
where it's highly connected,
Hmm.
meaning there's a ton of different connections to different nodes. However, the weights on the edges that connects these two nodes are slim. Or you can have that's like what social media does to you. Or you can have the opposite where you have a sparse graph, so you don't have that many connections to the node, but the edges are really firm, right? You know how you have a
Hmm.
strong connection. So it's like I think social media moves you to like this more hyper connected graph, but the edges are like pretty weak. Like because there's scenarios where you can kind of, I guess, the connections and the ability to move in and out of connections, and potentially being yourself, a different person from your actual self, and all these other different small things kind of make it so that the experience is not as valuable, because at the end of the day you're just another person online, so there's always
Yeah,
going to be another one, right?
it's
So
not nearly as authentic. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's like, on one hand, it is what we grew up with our whole lives, and yet, like personally, I've never really enjoyed it that much. Like,
mhm.
I've never felt like social media was a particularly enjoyable thing. I guess I often thought maybe I'm just like too like maybe you guys are just everyone else is just built different, and like their brains were not evolved from monkeys like mine, but like it it feels like too much, like it's too much all the time, too many people who can say like positive or negative things about you, like either one is weird. Without really knowing you, too many topics, too many like news headlines to know about all at one time. It like personally, it's like draining just to like learn that much, but not really learn any of it. Just to be exposed to it all is what it feels like.
Yeah, it's like information overflow.
Yeah, no, and it's like what you were saying about like the connectivity of like these nodes, which is from my understanding, like the sort of kind of like the principle that underlies machine learning, is it not? Is
Oh,
nodes and
machine
relative
learning.
connect, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, like you can think of a lot of machine learning. I guess specifically deep learning would
Mhm.
be this idea of a computational graph where data moves from left to right, and you have these nodes which are connected to other nodes by these weights, and these weights inform previous nodes how to manipulate next, like, nodes that will come after them, and this manipulation will in turn give you a model that is supposed to do some task, maybe predicting or regression or auto regression. There's different types of things, so it's really a computational graph that the connections represent this idea of it's kind of trying to represent the relationship between different parameters in the model, and eventually gets to the desired output. But yeah, it's definitely a very graphical type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I I'm interested in machine learning just as a concept because it's as an outs from an outsider who is a scientist, like it's something not only that I see in the world around me, but also is just like flooding all of the science that's around me and seems to be just completely useful in this
Mm,
weird way. Like it seems it's like
like
it,
magic.
it yeah, it's like magic. It's like when people found a microscope for the first time and you could see all the things that were
Yeah.
like microscopic and you could answer so many questions. Now suddenly every field machine learning is being applied to it and it's solving all of these really unique and interesting questions. Like I work in geobiology and I think about like life and earth and how they interact, and so in a lot of ways what happens is you get large streams of data, like or you just really complex systems, and it seems that often like machine learning guided with good natural science understanding seems to be able to be useful for to understanding certain things. And I recently got to actually use AlphaFold for like my own research, and like
Mm,
you can just like send them and they're just like in a couple weeks send you back the structure, which is like crazy to me. um
yeah.
which is like people don't understand like how revolutionary this is. and and I don't mean this in a way to like bash the scientists who used to like do this work, but rather to praise them because of how it like a concerted effort by a large team of of like X-ray crystallographers and physical chemists or physical organic chemists would take a very like highly powered concerted group of them would take like a year to come up with the structure of some molecule,
Hmm.
if not longer. And this is the way it's been done for a long time. um and there's still great use in that and like trying to understand dynamic structure and stuff like that, things that happen when proteins interact or
Hmm.
um under different conditions. There's other like techniques to use, but like machine learning has truly revolutionized this in a way that's very interesting to me. That's just like now in days to weeks, really just depending on how like back ordered they are, like you can just learn about the structure of some molecule and a computer did it all. So I
Hmm.
guess something that I think that is there something you think that's like what is the fundamental hmm, what is the fundamental like trait of machine learning that you think makes it so applicable or so useful in understanding complex systems or predicting things?
Hmm. Yeah, I think machine learning is broad. is a bit broad in terms of what what's under the machine learning umbrella.
Yeah.
However, I think what I'll do is I'll focus on the part of machine learning where I think most people are familiar with, which is typically like deep learning or neural networks. I think the biggest thing is there is so much, typically, there's such high dimensionality in the optimization problem that you're solving that the space is rich with solutions. Like there's so many solutions in that space. And machine learning is a tool that is designed to expertly traverse this space to find good solutions. So that's really what, or I guess deep learning more so, um, is designed to expertly find these particular solutions in this high dimensional space. So I mean that's really what machine learning, or I guess deep learning, kind of did. It says, you know, we have all these different um, data points, and there's so many of them that a human couldn't necessarily process and figure out how all of these things connect. Um, you know, what's the appropriate transformation to actually make this data useful, or you know, that kind of thing. So machine learning is expert at just being able to parse through dimensionality of, you know, in the millions, even higher, and be able to you know, solve that optimization problem of, you know, typically it's just minimizing some objective function that's defined by whatever the task is. So if it's, for example, prediction of a class, your minimization function would be trying to minimize like essentially the loss between the output of the labels, right?
Mhm.
The difference between the labels. So yeah, it's just that dimensionality, and then the ability to actually traverse that space is like the most powerful thing, I would say.
Okay, no, that's super cool. And I nearly forgot, but thankfully I didn't. Back to the question that I put a pin in like ages ago.
Hmm.
What is it? Some explain something interesting about like the sort of thing you do now, with regards to trading,
Hmm.
and yeah, how does that work? Like genuinely, it's just what is going on in
Yeah, I have to think about how I structure this answer, because like I can't talk about a lot of stuff like that. I just can't.
yeah.
Like, um, I would say the one of the this might be hard to parse, but I think the answer is in here somewhere. But the thing that's interesting about this particular space is that um, computer time is super valuable. It's the most valuable resource you have, and the entire engineering portion of this is how can we reduce the amount of computation that it takes to perform something. So everything is always hyper focused on, can we squeeze just a little bit more performance in this amount of time.
And what is the sort of time scales we're talking about? Like,
Like nanoseconds, even like picoseconds,
mhm.
like in the case of like, you know, just network infrastructure and all these different kinds of things, like you know, so you're talking about being able to perform, because a lot of the finance, I guess market making, a lot of like most of what determines the winner is who can get the right price first.
Mhm.
So there's this whole other part of I guess financial tech, or like the trading side of things, where there's this idea of modeling the data and understanding these market signals and coming up with the right price at the right time. Now, when you have that, it's possible that other firms have also figured it out as well. So then, assuming both of you guys are able to figure it out, it's like now we have to actually execute it before the other person does. So then
Mhm.
you get into the computer engineering side of things, where it's critical that you spend the least amount of time possible to get your trade executed. So you have all these different, you know, computer engineering solutions that are they're hyper focused on squeezing performance out of a system. So pretty
No,
interesting.
it's okay. Yeah, no, that is really interesting. It's like it sort of reminds me of like I used to watch these documentaries about like Enzo Ferrari and like how they would talk about building the fastest car and
Mhm.
like for the Grand Prix and stuff. Like it's all about squeezing that last little bit of horsepower out of the car so that or last bit of grip on the tires so that when you make the turn, it's like going at
Every
the
detail
fastest
matters.
speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's actually it's like you're building a Ferrari or yeah. No, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so if you ever want to tell people what I do, just tell them I make Ferraris, but for trading. Make it sound cooler. You know what I mean?
the, the trading Ferrari. Call him Enzo.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really cool. I get one sort of like bigger question to ask, maybe to like sort of wrap up is like, what are you like? What about computer architecture is like in general? What about computer architecture is interesting to you? And I guess that's kind of a broad question and maybe not the best question, but I'll start with that one.
Yeah. So computer architecture, I guess in this framing of the question, I'll take it to mean the underlying components that perform compute tasks. So, you know, typically these are just mathematical operations on bits. So one thing that I would say is interesting about computer architecture is it's this is one of the things you read in a textbook. Um, there's a textbook called Computer Architecture: A Quantitative Approach, one of the best books on computer architecture. But one of the biggest things they talk about in this book, which I always think about in my head when I'm like thinking about designing things, is common case fast, which is this idea of if something is happening a lot, you want to make sure to put effort into doing that thing quickly, because by putting your effort there, you're going to get the most return. So this actually comes into play with this idea called Amdahl's law. You can look it up.
Mhm.
AHMAL. I probably spelled it wrong. Whatever. Amdahl. I forgot how to spell it, but you probably figure it out. But yeah, Amdahl's law is essentially this idea that there's a diminishing return to optimizing something, the smaller it is a portion of the entire workload. So let's say I have workload split up into two sections, and one of the sections takes up 80% of the time, and the other section takes up 20% of the time. If I'm optimizing the 20% um, portion, then I'm not using the best, like I'm not making the best use of my resources. But if I'm optimizing the larger 80%, I'm going to see a much better return. Is this like, it's like that's the idea. And this plays a role. This like underlies a lot of like computer architecture, but it's one of the most interesting ideas of how to. And that's like one of the things you always kind of think about when you're thinking about performance is this something that happens enough that I want to make it super super fast. Yeah, but yeah, like that's like I think that's one of the things that first comes to mind when I think about some of the interesting things like that you see in computer architecture.
No, that's really cool. And my final question is, where do you think like you'll be in a decade? Like, is there something that you want to do?
Man,
Is
that's a crazy question.
yeah, it's an existential one. But yeah, like, is there a plan? Are there goals? Is it just to follow to continue your like optimization path to the amount of to optimize the speed at which you can level up? Like,
I don't know that level up speed. It's not something you can like. There's levels, but there's also caps too. Like there, I don't know, but yeah, that's a tough one. I would say most of the time, I feel like I think about the next steps for my life, it's really centered about, becoming someone who's contributing at an individual level in terms of, just my job or maybe like some of the other stuff I might be doing outside of that, to becoming someone who is creating experiences or services or whatever that will be able to impact other people in areas that I'm really like passionate about. So I think I would hopefully in the future be doing something where I can enhance people's educational experience. Like that's one of the bigger ones I have. How to impact education, and I also think one of the things that I'm interested in is impacting how people make financial decisions as well. So education and finance, because I think the curriculum or like I guess the the experience that a lot of people grow up with doesn't provide enough in those two areas. I think there's need in those two areas that I think would allow people to experience life more fully. And those are two areas where like I had to do a lot of my own learning of those two things. And there's things along the way that helped me. For example, for education, it was Khan Academy, for example. But yeah, those kind of things where it's like you're able to create impacts outside of just whatever you contribute on a daily basis to your workplace. But that's whatever that ends up being. Like I don't exactly know the exact form that that's going to take, but I think as far as me evaluating my life and what I want out of it, I think those are like some of the measures that I'm going to probably think about when I'm.
No, that makes. I mean, that sounds like amazing to me because, like, you said education and financial education, and that seems like two of the most important things in, like, well, hopefully, like two of the most. I mean, definitely two of the most important things in like the modern like world, and that will hopefully continue to become more and more important as more people get like the chance to learn and the chance to have money. So yeah, it's super fun. The Louis Vuitton Don. We'll be back for
No way.
sure within only a few episodes. Like this is always going to be the place where I go to look. This is where I always learn something. So it was cool. Thank you for doing it.
Of course, happy to be here.